So, bit of housekeeping, please do keep your microphones on mute to avoid any background noise, and we can turn those on afterwards when we get to questions after the presentation. Feel free to turn your cameras off, you're not going to need them for this session, and as I said, it's being recorded. So, welcome to the Local Government Reorganisation and Devolution Briefing. We're going to update you on what's happening. Just a quick introduction to the team at the SPCA. So I'm Robert Pritchard, I'm the County Executive Officer. We have with us as well Ian Cruz-Taylor, who's our Training Officer, and also Chelsea is our Health and Wellbeing Project Officer. So just to dispel any myths, this is happening. Some people are still saying that, oh, this won't happen, they'll change their minds. This reorganisation is a political priority of the government and a long-standing desire of the civil service. So this reorganisation is happening. We have been past the point of no return for quite a long time. So this reorganisation will take place. But it doesn't mean things haven't changed, and I'll come on to some bits that have changed as we go through the presentation. As a way of an introduction, how have we got where we are? In December 24, the government set out plans of how they wanted to reorganise local government and move powers from central government to local government across England, and they labelled this as devolution. And part of their plans involved reorganising the way councils work in England. And all this was laid out in a document called the English Devolution White Paper. So how will they go about implementing these changes? There were two major ways they wanted to do this. First was the creation of strategic authorities. So they were looking to set up bodies of a population of around 1.5 million and devolve to those bodies powers like transport, housing, education. If they have a mayor, they would attract additional funding. So think of the metro mayors, so the Andy Streets, the Andy Burnhams of the world, and eventually that would also take up the police, fire and crime commissioner role as well. Alongside that, they also announced unitary authorities where they weren't already in place. So they said they would abolish the district and borough councils, abolish the county councils, in our case also abolish the Stoke Unitary Council, and replace that current setup with one or more unitary councils covering all those areas. And then they also announced something they called neighbourhood governance. We'll come on to that later, but that's also a big part of the government's plans. For fear of telling everybody what they already know, this is the current structure of local government in Staffordshire as it stands today. So we have one county council delivering services like social care, libraries, roads, education. You have 8 district and borough councils, so they're doing planning, street cleaning, leisure, local services. I'm rounding 180 parish and town councils. There's 6 parish meetings. One unitary council, Stoke-on-Trent, which delivers the services and functions of both a county council and a district council. And there is no strategic or combined authority covering Staffordshire. And that setup is called 3-tier local government. And it looks like this. You've got your respective districts, Stoke-on-Trent, and then with excluding Stoke-on-Trent, Staffordshire is covered by Staffordshire County Council. I'll quickly cover the strategic authorities. So the strategic authority for Staffordshire. Staffordshire submitted a proposal for a foundation strategic authority. So that's sort of the entry level. All 10 councils in Staffordshire have all supported that and expressed a joint expression of interest, confirming that that's what they would like Staffordshire to have starting to start with. What does a strategic authority do? As mentioned, it will be devolved power and decision making and funding around transport, local infrastructure, skills, employment support, potentially housing, strategic planning, economic development and regeneration powers, environmental powers and net zero, Health, wellbeing, sort of public service reform will be linked in with some of this. Public safety, because obviously then it would take in police and crime commissioner function, and potentially more to be confirmed. There was an announcement on Friday, so we've had a new Prime Minister, and obviously that means some plans will get changed. And there was a number of key announcements that will impact strategic authorities. And the government announced that their ambition is every area in England will have a strategic authority in place by 2027. Mayors will take a share of income tax. So where there is a mayor for that strategic authority, they will take a cut of income tax from their area. And all strategic authorities will have the power to implement an overnight visitor levy, so a tax on visitors to the area. And they also talked about creating local accounting officers. So this is the chief executives of those authorities, and they'll be accountable for the use of public money by these authorities. And they also hinted at a stronger role for the local audit office and the national audit office in these new bodies. They also said where areas are not ready to adopt a mayor, so foundation, strategic authority, they'll work with them to set up the non-mayoral foundation strategic authorities with enhanced powers, including the option to introduce that overnight visitor levy. The government also announced there'll be greater alignment and pooling of funding for preventative services. Didn't describe it any more than that. By devolving funding, allowing strategic authorities and the constituent local councils to invest in joint projects. Another big change, the government will align key public service boundaries with the boundaries of the strategic authority by the end of the Parliament. And they've said this will include police, local authorities, fire and rescue services, and integrated care boards. There's a lot of stuff we don't know, a lot of stuff we're not sure how that's all going to work together. So they will be publishing a white paper with all the details and timescales for this implementation alongside the budget. That covers strategic authorities for now. So we'll come on to the reorganisation of councils. So the other part of the government's reorganisation is new unitary councils. So they deliver the functions of both the county council and the district and borough councils. So instead of having two councils, you have one that does all services, and it will inherit all the components and assets of the existing councils it is made from. Compared to the existing district and borough councils, it obviously will be more remote or more distant from its residents because it will be covering a huge area. So over the past sort of year, all the various councils in Staffordshire are building the case for their proposals, and they carried out consultation on their proposals last year. All these proposals with an awful lot of detail on how these new potential unitaries would work went to the government in November 25. The government consulted on these options in February 26 and has since made a decision. If you weren't aware, there's been considerable disagreement amongst Staffordshire on local government reorganisation. Many competing proposals were published by the different councils. There was very low public engagement with the government consultation, and the issue has been something of a political football. The question is, what will the new council look like? That's what most people want to know. So, as I previously stated, that's what we have now, and this is what we're going to get. The councils will be restructured into a North and a South Council. So the Northern Council will cover Newcastle under Lyme, Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire Moorlands. So a population of rounding up to 500,000. And then the Southern Staffordshire Council will take Stafford, East Staffs, Cannock Chase, Lichfield, Tamworth and South Staffordshire, and this will be nearly 700,000 people. And those two councils will have 84 councillors and 92 councillors respectively. So very, very big councils covering a huge area. What happens next? How is this all going to take place? What's the timeline? So I'll run through sort of what we can expect. So starting in 2024, obviously we had the announcement of the restructure and the white paper. In December, there was requests for early implementation councils. So there are places in England who are 12 months ahead of Staffordshire because they opted to go early. March 25, all councils had to submit interim proposals, which they did. September last year, the government finally published the bill. And then in November, detailed proposals went to government. Said February, the government consulted on these. May saw the last district elections in Staffordshire where they took place. And then in July, the government confirmed the decision for Staffordshire. And from now on, the development of the new authority begins for a bit later this year. What will we see next year? So in May, the shadow elections will take place, electing councillors to these new unitary councils. And for the first 11 months or so, they're called the Shadow Council. And then on the 1st of April 28, the old councils will cease to exist and the new council will take over all services. I'll go into a bit more detail on this timeline and what we can expect looking forward. So, as said, late summer, early autumn, the government will set out some more of the details they haven't yet confirmed, and we expect this in September. There's a few technical bits they're still talking to the district and county councils about. The areas being reorganised will set up what's called joint committees. So each council, new council, will have a joint committee. And the joint committee will include elected members from the existing councils and will work to oversee the transition of services and assets and so forth from one council to the next. Late this year, the government will do the apparatus to start the legal process to make this all happen. And this will be done by something called a structural changes order. And that will make the necessary legal changes to create the new council and abolish the old. May 27, as we said, elections will take place for the Shadow Council, and they will be elected before the new council starts. So they'll have about 11 months, and they'll then start to make the decisions on preparing the new council for when it comes online. So that will be, for example, appointing the senior officers. Summer 27, those senior roles will be appointed. So obviously they'll need to start with their statutory officers, the chief executive, finance officer, monitoring officer, and so forth. And then those officers will work to ensure that transition is smooth and the organisation is set up and will be working from day one. Day one, 1st of April 28, so that's the first day of the new council, and they call that vesting day. And at this point, it's fully established and responsible for all services, and the existing district county councils and Stoke are then dissolved. Bit more detail on how this is done. So I mentioned a joint committee. So what's that? So a joint committee is made up of members from the existing councils, and its job is to prepare for the new unitary council, and there'll be one for each unitary. And their focus is matters that need to be in place for day one for the Shadow Council, but importantly, they're not responsible for making decisions for the Shadow Council. That will make its own decisions. So those sorts of things might be preparing documents they need for their first meeting, code of conduct or constitutions, that sort of thing. They'll start to lay the groundwork. So when the Shadow Council meets, it's got drafted documents, drafted policies, or whatever else it needs in place. The Joint Committee will create a team of officers, and that's known as the implementation team, and they will do the nitty-gritty, the detail of the transition from one council to the other, and I'll go into a bit more detail on that shortly. What does the Joint Committee look like? So this will be the joint committees for the two new unitary councils. So North Staffordshire will have 2 district councillors, 2 county councillors, and 4 unitary councillors. So that's quite, I'd say, Stoke heavy joint committee. And then in South Staffordshire, there'll be 6 district councillors and 6 county councillors. I'll cover now the implementation team. So that's made up of officers. So obviously the previous committee was made up of members. This is made up of officers, and the deputy of that committee has a significant role working with the joint committees. The implementation team will be formed by the Joint Committee, but its sort of role and remit will be laid out in the structural changes order, and it will think of it as the behind the scenes stuff. So it will start to prepare things behind the scenes, and the rationale is that the officers hold the expertise on these sort of matters that are essential, from transitioning services, back office functions, all that sort of stuff, from one council to the other, and they will report to the Joint Committee, and then once elected, they'll report to the shadow councils. So what will the implementation team look like? So the head of paid services for the county council is the team leader for both. And then in the north, the head of paid services for Stoke-on-Trent is the deputy, and it's to be agreed amongst the councils in the south who's their deputy in the south. A lot of information there. So in a visual display, what does that look like? So once the structural changes order comes into effect, you have the joint committees and the implementation teams created. Once you have the elections, the joint committee will end and the shadow council will take over that work. But the implementation team will continue throughout. And then you have vesting day, so the 1st of April 28. All that comes to an end, and the unitary council is then up and running. After all of this has happened, we will go from 3 tiers of local government, so county council, district councils, boroughs, and local council, so town and parish, to a strategic authority, unitary councils, and our sector local councils. It still looks like 3-tier to me, but that's me just being cynical in my old age. We're going to come on to the impact to our sector. That's what we care the most about. There are opportunities, there are negatives, and there are things you need to consider doing. Opportunities, for many, it's an opportunity to try and take on assets from the district councils before they disappear, or from the unitary council in its early formation. And those things could be local parks or play areas, community centres, libraries, other community assets that are important to the local area that probably might be best placed to go to a parish or town council than to a big unitary. Many district councils are actively transferring assets, some are not, but there could be opportunities, instead of doing outright asset transfer, perhaps that might be an opportunity to enter into a partnership with the existing councils, or take on leases in the meantime to begin to look after some local assets. There will be increased interest in our sector, especially election time. We will go from 400 or so at least councillors, 400-500 councillors in all of Staffordshire for the principal councils, down to 80 something in the north and 90 something in the south. So there'll be a lot of people who will be looking still to get involved in local politics, and they will be in essence displaced and looking at our sector. So there'll be a lot more interest, and parish councils will enjoy a higher profile in their community. We will be the local council in many cases. There'll be no district councils or borough councils, so people will be looking to our sector because we will be seen as the new local council. That comes with some negatives. Obviously, you could have increased workload or particularly inquiries because people may be contacting our sector instead of the unitary because they can't find the district anymore. There's big uncertainty on services and the structure of these new councils. It's going to take years for them to put everything in place. Services will be restructured, teams will be moved around. So that's going to create uncertainty on how things are working, where their offices are, where their teams are based, all that sort of stuff. A big negative is the loss of external relationships. So many town and parish councils have somebody at the district planning department we can ring up and will always help us out, or somebody in the highways team, or somebody in the leisure department that we speak to and we have a good relationship with. Those people will be redeployed elsewhere in the new councils, so they may not be there to work with. So we will lose that relationship, and we'll have to build those up again after we've found out who's taken over. And obviously, all this change and all this reorganisation means there's a disruption to the wider council services, and that can mean people are coming our way. What can you do? We've always encouraged people to get neighbourhood plans in place. Obviously, some districts are now doing new local plans, so in that case, it's probably best to wait till they've finished. But a neighbourhood plan is a local planning document that will still pass over to the new unitary council. So we do encourage those. Some councils, there may still be a limited opportunity to ask for a governance review if you're struggling to be viable. It goes without saying, review your budgets and your capacity if you're seeking to take on assets. If you want to take on a local park, have you got enough money in the budget to pay for grass cutting, for example? We can offer support and training on that. And again, there may be a slight change in our role as we become higher in our local public mines, or we take on more assets or more choose to take on more responsibilities locally. So again, that could create a need for training, and please do reach out. Another impact to our sector is a rescheduling of parish and town council elections. So the government has said they'll be realigned with the new unitary elections. So there are councils in Staffordshire that have elections in 2026. So we expect them to be realigned with the new unitary election. So probably see those councillors elected in 26 getting an extra year. But we wait for this to be confirmed. And then the big one is neighbourhood governance. So this is a big change that's coming in with the unitary councils. The government has said that they believe this is a really important part of unitary councils and their reorganisation, and their goal is to move decision making made by the councils closer to local people. And the government said that it's developing the neighbourhood-based approach, and it will provide opportunities for public services to meet local need better. The details of how this is going to be done will be set out in regulations, and that is yet to be done. What we do know is parish councils will have representation on these panels. We don't know if that means one council will represent many, if every council will be on it, how they'll be involved in it. We just know we'll have representation. So this is a big unknown at the moment, a big uncertainty, because we don't know our role formally in this yet, and we don't know what it's doing. So we wait to see what's coming out of government to confirm what will be happening with neighbourhood governance. Just outline our response to this. Throughout this, we've been lobbying government and the local authorities in Staffordshire that the importance of our sector is acknowledged, that they see us as key partners. So when the new councils are created, they understand that our sector is a key partner for the new unitary authorities, that we have a role in saying what's happening, and particularly the strategic authority as well. We've been calling for provision of us in neighbourhood governance. That's now been secured, but we wait to see what that will mean in reality. And again, where there's a desire for local councils to take on stuff that asset transfer happens, they get the opportunities to take on assets they want, and this continues once LGR is completed. And then we've just issued a call for evidence, and we are asking councils to send us their views on what works well or what doesn't work, and the things they want to see in place for day one of the new unitary council. So details have been sent to all the clerks and chairmen, and how you can take part in that is contained within. We're lucky because this has happened before. Staffordshire is the last of the district and county councils to be reorganised. So this has happened already in many neighbouring areas, including Shropshire. So luckily, Ian is a clerk in Shropshire and he has experience of this. So Ian, if you want to talk through the experience you've had in Shropshire.
Yes, thanks, Robert, and good morning, everyone. I'm a bit of a prophet of doom, I'm afraid, in this respect. Even though Shropshire changed in 2009, I think it's fair to say that the effects of that are still being felt even now. So the points that Robert was making earlier on about the loss of local knowledge and experience are critical here. You've had officers who've had quite close working relationships with some towns and parishes throughout Staffordshire, and the same was true in Shropshire while there were district councils in place. What was interesting about the Shropshire approach was the introduction of local committees, not elected members, but local committees with some money to spend, and parish councils were in a position to apply for that money. So they sort of recreated district councils, but without the political oversight. And that worked reasonably well, I think, from an officer perspective. I think some of the other things to look out for, which might not be immediately obvious, apart from that restructuring of experience and local knowledge, is the slow response times. We all experience that now, whether we're in Shropshire or Staffordshire. I'm quite sure we have a very slow response time from some of the councils that we currently work with, and their priorities are not our priorities. What I sense happened in Shropshire was inevitably a focus on the statutory functions, and the discretionary functions are the ones that have gradually been wound down. And the Shropshire experience is compounded by budgetary issues, which many of you will have seen reported in the press. That's continuing, and the opportunity that is presented now in Staffordshire for towns and parishes to look at the possibility of taking over some of the assets currently run by districts, boroughs or the county wasn't offered in the Shropshire context. They continued through the county to run those services, apart from a limited number of aspects, particularly around youth provision. So there's a difference in the way Shropshire Council responded to the way you have an opportunity to put pressure on your new unitaries at a very early stage, because you can do that through the existing bodies, through the councils that already exist. I think one of the other features that I just mentioned, and I'm happy to deal with questions or comments as Robert will be at the end, is that we need to be wary of potential changes of policy that will come about with the unitaries compared to the county and the districts and boroughs, where there will already be differences in the way policy matters are handled, and obviously which political parties take over responsibility for the two unitaries will have a big impact on that. So being prepared for that range of different politics will be really, really important. And as the slide says there, Shropshire and Telford and Wrekin are of different political colours. The Lib Dems are now in charge in Shropshire, and Telford and Wrekin is very much a Labour area. Under the Conservative arrangements that existed prior to the most recent elections, the two councils barely spoke to each other unless they really had to. I'm not sure that's quite the case now. Things do seem to have improved a little bit, but the two behave and operate in very different ways. And so those towns and parishes that are on the borders of the two new unitaries will possibly see some distinct differences, and your residents will be aware of those differences. The other feature, I guess, is about money. Robert's referred to that. Clearly, if you're going to take on some services, then you'll need to think about how much that's going to cost you. But you also need to bear in mind that the tax that's charged, the council tax that's charged by the unitaries, is unlikely to reduce significantly if you were to take on those services. So you will need to develop a story, if you like, to be able to explain to the residents the impact of this change of structure and how it will impact on them financially if you were to take on some of those services. Robert, I think that's probably all. I could spend the rest of the morning talking about the effect of it, but I think I've probably depressed people enough as it is.
Thank you, Ian. I'll stop the recording now and we will go into questions. So if you want to raise your hand if you have any questions.